I'm Michelle Oshman with Bio. I lead external affairs, the Patient Advocacy Center of Excellence. If anybody is new to our coffee chat series, feel free to pop a note in the chat, or and we will introduce you. And if you don't want to be publicly introduced, just say hi to us. Today we have a really cool conversation. We're going to talk about the work that you all as patient advocates are doing to really continue to shape policy, patients shaping policy, in particular around CMS engagement, and the opportunities that are there before us. So, there are a lot of things that the patient community has fought for as part of the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and we really do celebrate with you the out-of-pocket cap in Part D, and of course the ability to smooth those costs over time, the MPPP. But we also know that there's an important aspect of the conversation that continues, and the importance of making sure that your voice continues to be part of that conversation despite those wonderful wins. We still really need to fight to make sure patients have access to the medicines that seniors need. And so we're going to talk about how do we keep that drumbeat of engagement up in a meaningful way, in an authentic way. And so we're going to hear from three folks today, three of my favorite policy colleagues: Crystal Kuntz, who is Bio's Senior Vice President for Health Policy and Research; Eric Gasho, who those of you who may have heard me speaking earlier is the Senior VP of Government and Policy at the National Health Council. I will tell you that Pat and I knew him back when he was like an associate assistant of something a long time ago. But look at him shaking his head. But you're amazing. And Pat Wildman, who I think all of you also know and love. And Pat and I have worked together for many years through his time at ALS Association and Lupus Foundation. And of course, as one of the principals of MapRx, which is a coalition really focused on protecting Medicare Part D, and starting to look at other aspects of Medicare as the redesign goes through. So what I'd like to do first is really have Crystal lead us off and just talk about a little bit about the IRA. I know there are folks on the call who might be a little bit newer to health policy engagement. So talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, what it does, why it matters, and highlight some sort of key points in time when all of you have a unique opportunity to bring the patient voice into the conversation. So with that, Crystal and her very cool glasses.
My cheap Amazon readers is what they are, but you know. So thanks, Michelle, and thanks for having me. I thought I would just make a few comments about, the negotiation program that was part of the IRA and a few other things. Highlight some key dates that we're looking out for that some of you may be aware of or you may not be aware of. And, happy to answer any questions. Again, I'll just kind of be at a high level because even though we are in the thick of all things with IRA, some of the details may not be as relevant to you all. Perhaps one way to look at this is kind of like timeline, right? So, the IRA created this new negotiation program. There's been a lot of noise around the negotiation program, but these negotiated prices under the IRA don't take effect until 2026, right? So I think that's always kind of an important thing to remind folks that even though there was a recent announcement, for example, around the first 10 drugs that were selected for negotiation, those prices don't take effect till 2026. And I'm sure Pat and Eric are going to talk about this, but for 2025, I think really many of us are just really watching what happens with the Part D redesign in 2025, with so much changing with the Part D benefit structure, and what this means for formulary access and related issues is kind of much more kind of on the forefront, or kind of an immediate issue. But nevertheless, there are some, important deadlines that we're watching for, and that I think some of you all, might want to watch for as well. So, the Medicare negotiation program, that's kind of year by year. So even though the process has been completed for year one, it will be underway again soon for the second year of negotiation that starts in 2027. And why am I talking about 2027 now? Well, because I think there's some key dates coming up in the next 6 months or so that just want to make sure you all are aware of. For example, there was draft negotiation guidance that was released for the second round of negotiations early this summer. The public was allowed to provide comments on that, and we expect CMS to issue final guidance sometime this fall. Not sure if it's going to be in October, November, but sometime before the end of the year. And I think in particular, for the patient community, CMS had said in that draft guidance that it was going to make additional efforts to further consider the patient voice as part of the negotiation process. I think many of you know there was some listening sessions related to, patient listening sessions related to the first round of negotiations, but they were a little bit oddly structured. It was literally just CMS listening. How do you know that CMS is really taking the information that you're providing and taking it into account and considering it? So I think CMS acknowledged this issue in its draft guidance and has kind of promised that it will, provide more fulsome opportunities to really engage and provide the patient perspective. So I think we will see what comes in the, final guidance that will be issued sometime this fall. So I think that's an important thing to look for. And then in early 2025, February 1st, we will see the next set of drugs that will be selected for negotiation. For the second year, there will be 15 drugs. I think, the drugs that you see on the list for the second round of negotiations will probably be very different than the first round of negotiations. For example, I think there's going to probably be more cancer drugs on the list. And then pretty quickly after those drugs are announced on February 1st, by March 1st, manufacturers have to submit to CMS certain information that's required under the IRA. But in addition, March 1st, 2025 is the deadline for the public to submit data on therapeutic alternatives to the selected drugs, data related to unmet medical need, data on impacts to different populations, those kinds of things. So I think, that's an important date for individuals to keep in mind who might want to provide comments. And then following on that March 1st deadline submission, sometime in the spring of 2025, CMS has promised to provide additional opportunities for engagement and to provide information, around the drugs selected for negotiation. Again, I think it remains to be seen how engaging these engagement opportunities will be, but nevertheless, this is what, CMS has said that they plan to do. I think in terms of near-term dates, the only other date that's really kind of top of mind for us, Michelle, is we're expecting, very soon for CMS to release what is called kind of the landscape files. They do this every year in advance of Medicare open enrollment that begins in October. These are the detailed files that provide information on premiums and, related benefit information. And certainly it takes some time to kind of, go through those data files and see what this means in terms of, the plans that will be offered to Medicare beneficiaries for 2025. But that's another date that kind of is on our radar in the immediate.
Lots of things. And I don't know if we can follow up with a slide or something for folks to take a look at. I know that we presented a lot of different things to our members, but just so folks.
Michelle, there's a really helpful fact sheet from CMS that has all these dates in it. I will send that to you.
Yes, send us the link.
Send it out as a follow-up to the group.
Yep. I know we're going to be posting the links for the NPPP and the plan selection site, but yeah, that would be great.
I'll send you the link for that as well.
Excellent. Cool. We'll share it. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Eric, why don't we turn things over to you? Again, I know you probably know most of the folks on the call, but if you want to do a 30-second overview of the National Health Council, just for anybody that might not know you already, and then you can talk about, certainly the work that you're doing with regard to the Inflation Reduction Act.
Sure. Well, I know there's at least one new person on here who mentioned Maria is watching out for the hurricane, so good luck, but welcome to the coffee chat. I'm Eric Gasho. I'm the Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs of the National Health Council. We are a membership organization founded in 1920, primarily patient advocacy organizations, but we are multi-stakeholder in membership. So we have biopharmaceutical companies, trade associations, bio and pharma. We have medical specialty societies, insurers, really the entire spectrum of the healthcare community that we work on issues that are most impactful to all people with chronic diseases and disabilities. And we have a governance and policy making that hears from all of the groups, but ultimately is driven by the voice of the patient advocacy organizations. So I'm talking about IRA, I'm going to kind of talk twofold, but really with the same general theme, which is really making sure that the patient perspective is included in the work that CMS does and the work that all of us are doing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Medicare drug price negotiation program, and then some on the Part D out-of-pocket cap and the smoothing or MPPP. So as it relates to the negotiation program, this will come as no surprise to anybody who knows the National Health Council, but our number one priority here has been consistently ensuring that the patient perspective is included as CMS is evaluating the value of these medicines. We've done a lot of work in this area as it relates to PCORI with comparative effectiveness research, with FDA as it relates to drug development, with ICER as it relates to value assessment and other value assessors. So really there's a ton that we have to bring to the table here, we being the broader community as we work with all of our members on these issues. And in the statute, there was no requirement that the patient community would be involved at all, but that's something that we quickly set out to with CMS and the implementation of it soon after passage of the law. And what they came up with was, as Crystal talked a little bit about, a set of listening sessions and an ability for the stakeholders to submit data. I will not belabor the point, but there was certainly much room for improvement after the first go round. And so in order to do that, we and to kind of help provide recommendations for that improvement, we pulled together a group of our members and other interested parties, particularly those who participated in the listening sessions earlier this year, to kind of hear what their perspective was on how well it went, to hear from those who didn't participate, why they didn't, to really kind of figure out some very concrete recommendations put forward to CMS. We did that in the springtime. We can probably share the link to that, but just at a real high level, what we wanted to see was more interactive nature of the sessions. We wanted to see, greater diversity of people participating. We wanted to see more opportunity and length of time to participate. And so really, put forward a number of recommendations. Similarly, on the data submission, we also talked about that there and really wanted to see more clarity of the purpose of both the sessions and the data submission, and more direct questions that people with chronic conditions can more easily answer in those in that data submission. So where do we find ourselves now? That's kind of the most important part here. Is that earlier this year we got guidance for the next round of negotiation. That did signal some coming changes. To Crystal's point, we'll see how that looks once we actually have more detail on it. But I will say it does sound like CMS is listening. They did kind of note some of the concerns that were raised. And excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold too. Excuse me a second. They did raise that they wanted to make them more interactive, that they might group them differently. Looking for a different mix of speaker types. So they, have signaled that. Similarly, on the portal and on the data submission, they did offer more specificity there, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of what we've seen since then. But they said in there, and this is something that I'm trying to get them to also talk about the listening sessions with, the questions that they want to ask the patients, and now that they've sort of grouped them towards patient-specific, caregiver-specific questions, is they're considering requesting a description about what it is like to live with a medical condition treated by the selected drug or its therapeutic alternatives, the factors a patient cares about most when it's in the value of the drug. That was something that we've really been trying to get out of them, to learn a little bit more about what they're trying to achieve here. And that's something that, we're glad to see that they are a little bit more clear in their thought there. So since then, since the guidance came out, they also released a what they call an information collection request, or an ICR, that actually started to list out some of the questions that they'll include in this portal. One of the overarching comments that we had on it was a lot of it's going to depend on the format of the portal, the user interface, things like that, to see how understandable it will be. But in terms of the actual questions that they said they're putting forward, I think there's a lot of improvement there. We certainly offered some additional recommendations, but they really are. We like that they're now grouped by stakeholder. So if you're a patient or caregiver, you can click on that and it'll send you right to the questions that are most relevant to you. I think that's going to be very useful and helpful. They do ask again the questions more geared towards the trade-offs that people choose and what's most important to them when assessing value. So we think that's really important. We'll share the link to our comments here, but overall, again, I think there's certainly a great improvement. We do want to see a little bit more patient-centeredness in it. We also want to make sure they are engaging with the communities as they roll out the portal, so that we can actually weigh in on what that looks like in terms of their ability to do it. As it relates to MPPP, I'll kind of go quickly through this, but I know Pat's going to talk about this as well. We are very, 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 very excited about the out-of-pocket cap for the first time ever in the Medicare program. We're also very, 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 very excited about the Medicare prescription payment program or payment plan, which allow people to pay their costs over the course of the calendar year. But we are also very, 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 very concerned about how well this is going to be rolled out. Just knowing how massive these changes are. These are the biggest changes when you combine this and then you add the negotiation the following year. These are the biggest changes we ever see with the program. And so for us, we really want to make sure that CMS and the community and really everyone at large understands the complexity of it and understands how challenging this is going to be. And it really is up to all of us to make sure that we're getting the information out to people, particularly in the areas that they need to make choices. So the MPPP requires someone to opt into it. That is going to be, they need to know about it in order for them to opt into it and know whether or not it's going to benefit them. And we're also, knowing that there's going to be a lot of changes here, plans are going to look very different next year. And so our first order of business is to really make sure that we're educating people that even if they like their Part D plan, they should be looking on Plan Finder to figure out what's going to be best for them, because it may be their current plan and it may be a different plan. I think it's always a best practice, but even more so this year. So we are working with a number of groups. I know Pat will talk about some of the work that they're doing as well, to make sure that people have this information. In the next couple of weeks, you'll see we're pulling together a kind of one-stop shop website for all of the information that CMS has put out, for all information that Pat and his organization has put out, and Alliance for Aging Research has information too. Really want to have everything in one place. We did something similar with the Medicaid unwinding. So really to have that one-stop shop. So my sort of ask here for the group is, if you have any resources that you've put together, any that you've seen, please send them our way. We also are pulling together a small handful of folks that will kind of help us identify these. Pat's been invited and a number of others as well, our kind of little coordinating group to make sure that we all know what each other are doing, what the community is doing, and to figure out where there may be some information gaps as we are pulling together our own information as well. So if folks are interested in joining that, please feel free to reach out as well. Those are kind of my biggest asks at this point, but certainly we'll be rolling out explainer videos, choose your own adventure, all types of stuff to kind of help fill in the gap, in addition to some of the work that we saw CMS recently put out. So with that, I'll stop. I know we want to make sure save some time for conversation, but want to just make sure folks heard about the stuff we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And so Eric and Jen, Dexter, if you want to just put your email addresses in the chat so folks know how and where to send stuff if they don't already have you on speed dial, that would be great. And turning things over to Pat Wildman, who is just a wonderful colleague and friend. And for those of you who didn't know, pretty amazing hockey player as well, with a daughter who has recently come back stateside after playing professionally in Europe. So sorry, I just have to brag on your dad stuff because that's pretty cool too. So, and most of us just don't hear about it because you're so busy working.
Thank you, Michelle. And I should qualify, I used to be a good hockey player. I'm too old for it now. And apologies in advance. I'm a little under the weather, so hopefully it doesn't come across too poorly in my voice. But thanks for the opportunity this morning, Michelle, and good to see everybody. So I'm Pat Wildman. I'm Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Government Relations at the Lupus Foundation of America. And we established the MapRx Coalition back in 2005, right at the advent of Medicare Part D. And for those of you who aren't familiar with MapRx, we are a national coalition of about 60 plus patient organizations dedicated to preserving and strengthening Medicare Part D and really helping ensure beneficiaries have access to needed medications through the program. There's a variety of different activities that we do throughout the year, regular coalition meetings, regulatory and legislative advocacy. We have Hill briefings. We actually have the one coming up in early October. We'll certainly get that out to Michelle and she can share it with the group once we get that scheduled. And a lot of other different things that we produce, whether it's comments, whether it's letters to the Hill, whether it's white papers and position papers, things like that. A lot of different activities that we do as a coalition. And as I think all of us on this call for the past couple of years have been really, pretty much fixated on IRA. Everything IRA has been our focus over the past few years. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that we've engaged CMS and what we're looking to do going forward, and kind of bucketing it in a couple different ways. The first is something that Crystal had talked about earlier, and that has to do with benefit redesign and negotiation, and what we're anticipating coming down the road with the plans. We're very, very concerned with how redesign and negotiation are going to impact access. And MapRx produced a paper earlier this year about the unintended consequences of IRA. And largely the focus there is on plan behavior. Because of redesign, because of the increased liability that plans are going to face, the financial liability that plans face, there's going to be a reaction. We're anticipating increased utilization management, narrowing formularies, increased cost sharing, increasing premiums, reduced choice, particularly in the standalone PDP market. And there's probably going to be increased pressure on Congress and others to do things about the six protected classes and potentially threaten that policy. So there's a lot of potential consequences that while we have the great things with the out-of-pocket cap and with smoothing, and I still call it smoothing, with the Medicare prescription payment plan, great things there. There also are the things that aren't so great, and we're very concerned about those. So there's going to be a huge need for us to really monitor those and need for CMS to do that. And these are things that we've communicated to CMS about. And also a need for us to work with CMS to have a structured process to provide feedback and input to the agency about what we're seeing, what the beneficiary community is experiencing over the next year, over the next years. And not only anecdotally, but a process, and Eric and I actually were talking about this yesterday, a process for us to provide data about the beneficiary experience and what access challenges are they having, and even to the level where we can provide some specificity, what plans, where, what are the exact challenges, what are the drugs involved, so that we can drill down and help to address and prevent problems going forward as IRA continues to get implemented. So that's going to be a critical focus over this coming year, and something we'll be very vigilant about. So that's kind of the redesign and the negotiation part. And I will say MapRx also has been involved in some of the things that Eric talked about when it comes to listening sessions and really informing the negotiation process. That's something also that we've been involved in. I won't belabor the conversation here since Eric covered some of that. But then there's the beneficiary education part about M3P, about the cap, about the expansion of LIS. And that part, that's been the challenge. There have been more challenges, surprisingly, when it comes to engaging CMS on those issues. CMS has actually been pretty good, I think, with the patient community when it comes to the policy side and working with us. And the Center for Medicare and the staff there have been very good at speaking with us and listening to us. So we may not always agree on things, but they've been very good at listening and willing to work with us. Now, when it comes to beneficiary education about M3P and about the cap, that's been a bit of a challenge, and it's unfortunate because these are things that are really going to benefit the patient community, those that we all represent, the people that are most impacted by the ability to spread their cost out or having the option to spread your cost out over the course of the year. So we certainly have made an effort there. There's going to be continued efforts to try to work with CMS to make sure that the resources that are available to beneficiaries are adequate, that the promotion of the program is sufficient to make sure that people are taking advantage of something that can really help them. So some of the things, well, let me back up a bit. The MapRx certainly has been involved in the policy part of this as M3P has been developed with the Part 1 guidance, the Part 2 guidance, with plan reporting requirements, what the plans are required to send and to share with beneficiaries. But we really pivoted now with open enrollment right around the corner to the patient education part. I know CMS came out with a couple weeks ago with their website, which Michelle referenced earlier. There are some good things on the website about the Medicare prescription payment plan. The video is relatively informative. They have some decent materials on there. It's unfortunate again that we weren't able to see this in advance. And that's something going forward. One of the things that we want to really be doing going forward is how can we improve this? What needs to be improved on the CMS website? What they're doing, what they're not doing. Some of the shortcomings of the website, I will say, two in particular. One is there is a tool on there that allows people to kind of answer a series of questions and arrive at a conclusion of whether or not the Medicare prescription payment plan is the right choice for them. We're very concerned that it's going to steer people away from it. There's only one situation in which it recommends that it's a good option, and that's if people hit the $2,000 out-of-pocket cap before September. In every other scenario, it doesn't. It says it's not recommended for folks, and that's a concern because it assumes too much about everyone's personal situation, and I think that's a big miss, and I think it's a big loss. So that's an issue. The other thing that's not their tool, our understanding again, is that it's tied to the plan finder tool, so that someone identifies, they select their drugs, they select a plan, and it will show them what their costs look like with the M3P and without. We haven't seen that tool. We don't know how it works. We don't know the limitations of it. A lot of concerns with that. It would be great to be able to test it out to see how how it works. Can it be used during the middle of the year so that you can see what your smoothing looks like in June, from June to the end of the calendar year, or is it just strictly looking at the full calendar year? So that's coming. We just don't know what it looks like right now. So those are some of the shortcomings, and that kind of points to the where we're looking at going forward. And before I get to that, let me share a little bit more about what MapRx is doing in terms of the resources that we're producing. So probably within the next 2 weeks or so, hopefully by the end of this week, we'll be finalizing a whole series of materials. One is a guide to the Medicare prescription payment plan, how it works, what it is, frequently asked questions, links to resources where people can get more information, including links to patient organizations. So we'll have that guide. We'll have an infographic, so just a one-pager, something visual, easy to understand about the Medicare prescription payment plan. And then we'll also have a call center script that really is a document that that folks at patient groups that all of our staff can use when they engage our constituents. And I'll say that all of these materials are fully customizable. So we make them available to the MapRx Coalition members. We make the art files available so that they can brand them their own, they can customize them to their own patient communities. So those resources will be coming out very soon, and we're looking forward to that. And then also, I should be remiss to say that to not say that we also have a broader open enrollment guide that helps people navigate open enrollment to select a plan that's right for them. I think Eric and others had mentioned earlier, this year especially, it's going to be very important that people shop around and look to see what their plan options are, what changes have been made to their plan, because there will be changes. There certainly will be changes, and they may not be, their plan may no longer be the best fit for them, whether it's because of changes in the formulary or other changes. And then that kind of leads me to, and I'll end it right after this, is to some of the things that we really need to focus on going forward when it comes to the Medicare prescription payment plan. One is how is it working? And I think one of the things that we're doing at LFA will be monitoring how are our patients navigating through this? Are they finding information? Are they opting in? And if they're opting in, what is that experience? But we need to get more as a community, work with CMS, work with the plans, and work with the Hill. Enlist our supporters on the Hill to get feedback about what is CMS seeing, what are the plans seeing, how is this working? How many people are enrolling? When are they opting in? Are they opting in before the plan year? Are they opting in during the plan year? What are their cost levels? CMS has limited the outreach to this. They've set a pretty high threshold. So the outreach is only going to promote M3P is only going to those who either hit the cap or during the year if they have a single script of $600 or more. So are they missing people? But we need to know who's opting in, who's not opting in, and how are they learning about it? Are they learning about it from their plan? Are they learning about it at the pharmacy counter? Are people being disenrolled because they're missing payment? Or are people voluntarily disenrolling? All of this type of data is going to help inform kind of what our next steps are going to be. How do we need to change things? How does CMS need to change their education and outreach? Are there things that we need to do operationally or CMS needs to do operationally to change? And perhaps most important when it comes to the M3P is a point of sale option. Right now, the only way to opt into this is via the plan. And we've certainly been pushing for it for a while, is the option to enroll at the pharmacy counter. So some of this data is going to help inform that, but we need to continue to push for that, as well as another opportunity to enroll via Plan Finder. You can enroll in a plan via Plan Finder, but you can't enroll in the Medicare prescription payment plan via Plan Finder right now. So that's another thing that we want to certainly advocate for. So there's a lot left to do and a lot that we need to be really vigilant about, both when it comes to access and the challenges that we're expecting with utilization management, among other things, and then from the education standpoint to make sure that people really are benefiting from these changes that we all advocated for. So with that, I will turn it back over to Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much. So again, for folks who may not be familiar with MapRx, they make it easy to plug and play, creating a lot of the resources that you all need to share with your own membership. So, and those are customizable. So please don't feel you need to reinvent the wheel. And if you're not familiar with MapRx, Pat will put his email address in the chat. But I think coming back to you, Eric, I think to reiterate on Pat's point around the importance of sort of the monitoring the redesign component. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one thing I was going to mention in terms of our recommendations on the negotiation program as well. We expect a lot of really interesting things to happen from plan design as it relates to both the redesign and the negotiation program going into effect in the next couple of years. And we share a lot of the same concerns that Pat mentioned. CMS has said that they are at least keeping an eye on what's happening, but There's no understanding of sort of how that's going to work, what they plan on doing, how they'll do that. I was actually in a meeting with someone from the agency yesterday who mentioned, it's really easy for people to report these. All we need to know is the name of the drug, the name of the plan, and what the problem is. Like, okay, well, who do they go to? What do they take? And what do they do with one anecdote? And so, Pat, really made a really important point that I think, CMS is very much driven by data. They're driven by trends. They're driven by more than just one incident. And so one of the things as part of our trusted messenger program, in addition to a lot of that education, we do want to be that, we can call it a clearinghouse or whatever, term we want to use to kind of set up that process so that, individual organizations don't have to necessarily have a great contact at CMS. If you do, that's great. But making sure that there is that kind of way to plug and play information. And so more to come on that, but that is something that we are planning on rolling out as the program rolls out, to hear about what those challenges are, but also, to Pat's point, hear what's going well. Hear people who are benefiting from smoothing, who did benefit from the cap. I think making sure that we're talking about the experiences of these policies as opposed to just the negative experiences. Those are probably the most hair on fire, but we do want to hear what goes well as well, because then we can look to make sure that benefit is spread to even more people and is even more generous benefit. So thanks for letting me weigh in on that point. And, again, more to come in that area.
So if folks have questions, feel free to just pop your name in the chat and we'll call on you, or put a note in the chat. I think a couple of questions I want to go back to a couple specific areas. One is for either Pat or Eric, as you think about the next points in time when the patient voice will be really important, and Crystal talked about really through Q1 of next year, February 1, March 1. When you talked about one of the concrete questions that CMS needs to be considering or will be considering is asking what that patient, like the patient experience is on a given prescription, right? Like given, so talking to the actual patient population, how do you advise patient advocacy organizations? We have so many on the line who represent different disease areas. How do you recommend their engagement when a drug that is pertinent to the population or to the specific patient community pops up on that list? I mean, if patient groups come to you guys and say, what should we do here? How do you advise, or what are your recommendations or thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's, it starts with just doing it. To take a phrase from Nike. I think that's something that, we are learning as we go along, all of us, the community, the industry, the agency, in terms of kind of best practices here. But I do know that there's a number that we've really kind of developed over the course of our time with patient engagement in other areas. So certainly we have a number of tools and resources on our website to kind of help people. We have a get ready checklist for value assessment. We have a value model rubric. We have a number of resources that we would recommend that people take a look at that have a lot of best practices for this. But I think overall, it's, again, making an effort. I think there's also the ability that people have, and we recognize there are very short timelines that are ahead of people when this list comes out. If folks are able to conduct surveys or focus groups or things where they can bring more than just that one perspective into it, while it's great that, there's opportunity for individuals to participate in these listening sessions, if it's someone who can be equipped with a broader set of data, we think that's even better. I know there were a number of groups who did do that during the first round. So I think that's always ideal as well.
I'll ask my colleague Crystal. I know that you and Christy Barton talk about being on each other's bat phone, and Christy talks about you being on her bat phone, certainly. But as you think about the opportunities for CMS to be agile and to really respond to the patient community, what are some of the opportunities and some of the challenges in that from your perspective there?
I mean, I think, one of the themes you've heard from me, from Eric, from Pat, I mean, I think the opportunity is CMS is always willing to have a conversation. I don't think they have said no to us once. Anytime we have reached out, they said, we're happy to chat, and they usually do so fairly quickly. So, I mean, the door is open. They are very accommodating in that way. I mean, I think, but then the frustration is you still don't really know what they're doing, I mean, so it's kind of like, I think on the formulary issues, on the concerns about the smoothing. I still call it smoothing too. I just, it's one word. On the smoothing, I think that, CMS again is always, willing to chat, but then they're pretty close to the vest about what they're doing. And I get it to some degree. I mean, it's a big agency. Like they can't, but I think sometimes they've just been a little bit too limiting. And I also have been, frankly, a little frustrated in where I think, I feel like CMS needs to be a little bit more accountable. And I can understand where they don't want to reveal everything they're doing to review plan formularies. But at the same time, I mean, they are the stewards of the Medicare program. Tens of millions of Medicare beneficiaries are in this program. And I think it's incumbent upon them to be a little bit more accountable about how they're staying on top of the access, changes that are occurring, what they're doing to take action. So I think, trying to move them in that regard is, something that is going to be at the forefront for us.
I mean, there's such an alphabet soup out there. So, I mean, the MPPP and smoothing and CMS and all of the things above. I mean, I'll refrain from using other three-letter acronyms that beg the question, but they might stand for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Andrew Scott from BMS, you have a comment or a question?
I do have a question, actually. Thank you, Michelle. And Crystal actually just kind of brought this up when we're talking about, accountability for CMS. And I was thinking earlier to what Pat mentioned also, too, was sharing some of MapRx's research and early findings with Capitol Hill. I'm wondering if, and I guess this is a question for both Eric and Pat, if you all have well, first off, how have those conversations gone on the Hill? How have the reactions been? The sharing of this research on unintended consequences and more, do you have a sense that offices are aware of the risks going into next year? And then outside of that, to Crystal's accountability point, is there a need for potentially appropriations language or something that would require CMS to monitor some of these potential changes? Just would love your guys' thoughts on that.
I'll start. I know, Pat, you've had a lot of conversations as well. I think a short answer to your question, Andrew, is no, they are not aware of the magnitude as much of it. I think the main focus that I think, and for good reason, I think has been really what the premium impacts have been and are going to be. And I think maybe some of that has quieted down a little bit with this new demonstration that's going to limit the premium increases. I think that's where a lot of the focus has been. I think you raised a good point about making sure that there is something in place there to do that. But Pat, I know you've also had some conversations.
Yeah, I mean the premiums the focus that has been the response so far is just all focused on premiums, and we knew the premiums were going to be impacted, and that was I think one of the things as a patient community we were willing to accept a moderate impact on premiums for better access and more affordability, and so that was that was a little bit that certainly was expected, but that has been the only focus, and that's a concern. The broader access challenges are critical. That's it, and we'll continue to beat the drum with the Hill and engage the Hill as well as CMS and our champions on the Hill. One of the things just on that note that we want to advocate for is also the ability for patients to make informed decisions when it comes to choosing their plan. Right now, and we always tell people don't base it on the premiums, base it on the benefit, but they're limited in their ability to do that. And we'd love to see a way for people to see what utilization management looks like when they're selecting their plan, selecting a plan. But there's going to be certainly a need for continued advocacy there. That we have engaged the Hill when it comes to report language and other ways largely to ensure that CMS is reporting back. What's happening out there and providing the data and being transparent about it and not just keeping it close to the vest and so that they can do what they want to do, but we want to make sure that there is transparency, that the Hill's aware of what's happening, that we're aware of it as a community, so that it can inform what changes need to be made. So there'll be certainly a need to continue to work with the Hill. And sometimes we forget, like once we pass something, and you kind of forget about the champions on the Hill. We need to make sure that they're still engaged on this, and they can continue to champion the regulatory implementation of these things. Great questions, Andrew. Certainly a lot still to do.
Yeah. How are
I
you
would
developing
also add
champions?
that
Oh,
I think there's a trick here with the politics around this as well, that I think hopefully as we move into next year may alleviate itself a little bit, not being in an election year. Because this is something that is very much driven by a bill that was passed by one party, but it was an idea that was bipartisan to cap out-of-pocket cap or to cap out-of-pocket costs and to have a smoothing mechanism. But we also know that that could very well sort of feed into any sort of narrative that one wants to make it, particularly as we're both parties, I think, are blending the two sides of the IRA. And so I think there are more conversations happening behind the scenes, and I think there are publicly than members are willing to be public at this point. So I would say continue to have those conversations so that hopefully we can get them to be a little bit more public with their concerns as they're also talking about the benefits of the cap as well.
yeah. I was one question that pops up for me is thinking about champion development on the Hill, as you have folks, fewer and fewer folks on the Hill who even were around when Part D was created, and to protect Part D and to push for patient engagement, patient advocates to have a voice in that. And I guess I wonder from either of you or anybody on the line, how are you thinking about developing those Hill champions to really make sure that there are folks supporting patient access for the future?
I didn't know this was going to be a what keeps you up at night session here. Because you say there's fewer and fewer, but like take a look at the list of retirements this year too. It's particularly look at the Energy and Commerce Committee. We are losing a lot of intellectual capital there. So I think it is. I think that the key here is going to be grassroots. I think it's going to be particularly with a lot of new members coming in, a lot of new staff coming in. It's going to be those fly-ins. It's going to be them meeting with constituents who have a lived experience. It's the things that we always talk about in terms of the patient story going with the data. I don't think those things change, even as many things have changed on the Hill. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to really be the key, is being able to put a face to the challenges that everyday Americans face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree with that, and one of the things that MapRex is, we have our Hill briefings for every year. We have multiple Hill briefings, and again, I'll once we have the dates, Michelle, I'll shoot them to you for early October. And a lot of what we're doing with the MapRex Hill briefings is educating staff about the policy side of it. But it's really incumbent upon the patient organizations, and LFA, we do this as well, is to put the face on the issues. It's one thing to understand the policy; it's another thing to understand how it impacts, constituents. So that's I think really how we generate and cultivate champions for these issues.
Hey, Shri, introduce yourself to the group.
Hey, I'm Shri with Amputee Coalition. Thanks so much, Michelle. I wanted to actually put kind of a visual to what Eric was just saying of kind of a success story, because it started at least since 2016, if not longer. But this approach to Hill visits, patient advocacy, really taking on that embodiment of the lived experiences, sharing those stories with Hill members and staffers, and having actual staff from like the coalition and other partner organizations in attendance. It led to the earlier this calendar year, through conversations that had continued happening in public forums, even AC Connect, so that's our internal communication platform for individuals who have limb loss and limb difference, to kind of share their stories and vent and ask their questions, the conversational style. And CMS had put out a request for comments regarding a particular bill for the expansion of coverage to include K2 mobility levels for people to access and be able to receive the microprocessor needs that were previously reserved for K3 and K4. So it's a mobility scale, but that simply leading to actually effective September 1, those comments all related to the direction that CMS took of expanding that coverage to K2. So it's many years of Hill visits, many years of signs that say things like, get your hands off of my legs. And it's a kid who's wearing a prosthetic leg and holding up this sign because it's that visual demonstration of what this means, and raising rallies and sit-ins and, going time and time again, and then also taking effect in the opportunities with CMS or anyone else, of really being able to explain what the stories are and what the problems are, and then turning that on like the individual of, this is what my issue is. And it's one of many in that story. So it's really cool to see how something has taken, yes, 8 years at least, but also it's the exact kind of story of what Eric was mentioning.
Yeah, I think we have a topic for a future coffee chat, is share if folks talking about your Hill days, and I think that's important. I don't want to embarrass anyone on the line. Lisa Schlager, who just had a really great Hill day this summer with Force, but a lot of folks on the line have run Hill days and really had some fantastic results. So if folks don't want to necessarily speak up and share here, just we'll make sure that just feel free that you connect with each other, because all of you have so much expertise. So Raisa Levy asks a question for patient advocacy groups that advocate on the Hill. What can we do to maintain the uniformity of our message to make sure focus stays the same, even though areas of interest may differ? So I'll turn that to, I think
it's a lot of communication. And I think it's, doing it through coalitions, through membership organizations, National Health Council being one. I'll just throw it out there. I think in those areas where we are partnering with one another, making sure that we're kind of even just knowing kind of when the Hill visits are, and if you're going to be up in the people with the orange scarves on the same day as the people with the purple ones, to have those conversations, make sure that where there are consistent asks, and there will be a lot of top line appropriations asks, for example. I think it's there's just should always be this opportunity through coalitions and through organizations to chat about it.
Other questions or comments from folks before we wrap up? Before we do, I do have to just ask Eric to talk for 30 seconds about the map behind you and all your bobbleheads, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you have now officially been to every major league ballpark in North America. Is that correct?
Not yet.
I apologize.
My dad recently did, though, so I went with him to complete them. But the map is actually bottle caps from all the different states, but it became more difficult to fill it in as craft breweries went to cans. So it's kind of been stagnant there for a little while. But then I've got bobbleheads from both the Dodgers, which is my team growing up, and the Nats, which is my adopted team.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. With that, unless there's anybody that has anything else to share, we just really welcome your engagement and thank you for your participation today. We will send a link out so you can share the recording with folks in your network if they may be interested. I'll also post it on my LinkedIn page so you have access to it. We really appreciate all of you. For those of you who may not be aware, BIO has our annual Patient Health and Advocacy Summit coming up October 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. If you're interested in attending, please shoot me a note, moshman@bio.org, or anybody here, and we really would love to share more with you. And any of the policy acronyms, discussions, conversations that we've had today, feel free to reach out to either myself or anybody on the line. We are more than happy to help. You get to learn this stuff little by little over time, and then before you know it, you'll be an expert. Have a great day, folks. Take care.